I didn't put any stories up.
The world's best vulnerability scanner. Jumpstart your security program today and evaluate Security Center CV, the continuous monitoring solution. For more information, visit them on the web at Tenable.com. ProXPN is the leading VPN service offering free accounts, excellent premium features, and an outstanding commitment to privacy and security online. Use the discount code WEEKLY and save 50% off for life. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with a proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email them at contact@netsparker.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly. Sorry, I was just chatting with some of our viewers and listeners in the live chat. You can go to securityweekly.com/live every Thursday evening, 6 p.m. Eastern Time is when we start broadcasting. We're on YouTube now. We made the switch from Ustream to YouTube, and we love it. We love it.
Interesting.
It's free.
Uh-huh.
Awesome. Secondly, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/securityweeklytv, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, when we go live, you get a notification that reminds you.
Nice.
We find that more people watch us live now because they're getting that reminder.
I wonder, I hate to say this, but what about Facebook Live?
That's more like I'm at a conference and I want to show a little snippet of a video. I'm sure it could work to stream the show live. It'd be interesting to stream on both.
Yeah.
Actually, our Facebook page, thanks for mentioning, facebook.com/SecWeekly, SEC Weekly, has been getting some great traction lately. Thanks for everyone who follow us on.
I don't even know if I'm a member of that group.
Yeah, if some people use Facebook, some people don't. We'll talk about Facebook and some reasons why you might not want to use Facebook. But, I do want to say if you have suggestions for the show or feedback on our technical segments, Larry and I talked about specific builds that we did for our firewall. If you're like, oh my God, you shouldn't be using that chipset, you should be using this chipset. I'm by no means claiming to be an expert in building computers. I've done it over the years, and I wish I spent more time researching it. But if you have suggestions, please email them to the show. When you can email the show at psw@securityweekly.com. That's psw@securityweekly.com. Email your suggestions in there. We're more than happy to take viewer feedback. And if you have an interesting question, we may read it on the show. I do want to say my next one of my other technical segments I'm working on is Raspberry Pis. I bought a couple of Raspberry Pi 3s, Model Bs, which to me have really progressed to the level of CPU and horsepower to be truly useful. I'm building, in fact, it's going to go live here in the studio probably tomorrow, DNS and DHCP servers, and I'm doing some interesting things with ad blocking and security on those particular systems. And really my goal for some of these technical segments is we started doing Enterprise Security Weekly, and we talk about enterprise security solutions and threat intelligence. And yes, we're sponsored by a threat intelligence company as well, Threat Connect. But how can people do this on their own? I mean, pfSense is, for all intents and purposes, a next-generation firewall. You can do some blacklisting and threat intelligence on your own with open source feeds, and that's built right in the one. I stumbled the reason I'm doing is because on pfSense it's like, well, if you point to me for your DNS server, which I like to have a separate DNS server from the firewall, to go back to your point, Larry, they're like, well, you can do DNS blacklisting. I'm like, well, I want to do DNS blacklisting, but on my DNS servers. And I'm like, I need to build some new DNS servers. I'm like, Raspberry Pi kits are $50 each. I want them $50 each, plus a micro SD card.
Yep.
So one other point on that, there is other hardware out there that uses the ARM chipset, and the Odroid stuff is also very good and interesting stuff. I have a couple of Odroid boxes here at home, which I play with once in a while, and I probably need to put some more time into, but they also run various variants of Linux OSs, and you can have a good time with that stuff.
So, Paul, if you need some of that stuff, I'm happy to help out and any of those. I have 4 Raspberry Pis running in quote production at home currently. 2 with RTL SDR radios on them for doing monitoring of various stuff.
Oh, yeah.
2 doing displays. I actually use one as a purpose server for a ZNC bouncer. I have one doing temperature monitoring. I have one doing weather display and clocks and stuff. I have a stack of probably a dozen of them sitting on the desk. I have 5 of them in various configurations for projects. Because you can, when you're doing hardware-based projects, a virtual machine is only going to get you so far for actually interacting with hardware.
Right.
I have, for example, one that is using the Pi FM stuff. It's got a wire on one of the GPIO pins, and it's a transmitter.
Nice.
And it transmits FM, and you could do data exfil over FM radio and any of those types of things.
That's awesome. And I was going to say, Larry, just to add to that, I've used both Odroid and Raspberry Pis, and actually soldered the GPIO pins to like Adafruit modules to do cellular modems, and be able to talk on cellular networks via data. So there's all kinds of cool stuff you can do with that.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, both of you using the Raspbian for all of that, right?
Yep.
That's like the operating system.
I use Raspbian for everything.
I like it. It's pretty good. It's essentially Debian.
Yep.
I didn't. I used some Ubuntu variant, but it's very similar.
Gotcha.
As far as I'm concerned, Raspbian's an Ubuntu variant.
Debian and Ubuntu.
I couldn't tell you the difference.
So I'm excited about all these tech segments.
I have one of those little teeny Pelican cases full of SD cards.
Micro
but
SD.
I absolutely
SD and micro SD because I have some of the Raspberry Pi version 1s that are SD cards.
I see. The thing with micro SD, like I lost the whole system for a period of time today. Because I was cloning it, and I put the micro SD card on my desk.
You know what's even worse is when you go to eject one of those things and your finger slips off and it goes, I'm like,
that's like the one downfall.
Right in the kids' toys. I'm like, shit, I'll find that next
time. You can't even focus on it, but this is my Odroid. I mean, they are so small.
Like, did you lose that? You're like, oh my God, I just lost my whole operating system. My whole system's gone now.
Yep.
And
they're actually quite physically delicate. You have to be very careful with your micro SD stuff.
Absolutely.
Alrighty.
I want to start by talking about, we mentioned social networking and Facebook. There's actually 2 stories that I have on Facebook. One is Facebook using your physical location to suggest friends.
Oh, I hate that.
But it's interesting, Joff. So I help coach. I'm not the head coach. Believe me, I don't want that level of responsibility for my son's Little League team. And we had the end of the season cookout. The head coach was nice enough to have a cookout at his house. And I added a couple of the coaches on Facebook because I wanted to keep in contact with them. Because end of the year cookout, I brought cigars, and 2 of the other coaches were like, "Oh, this is great." So I'm like, "We totally have to get together for a cigar." So we added each other on Facebook, and when I searched for their names on Facebook, it was like immediately the first result was them. And I think it ties into this story on how Facebook definitely tracks your location.
Yep.
And when they suggest friends, or when you're searching for someone, they're like, "Oh, you want." First name, last name of the person who's closest to you, and since they know that, they recommend it. And one of the guys was like, "Oh, that's really, really good." And I'm thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, "No, that's bad." I didn't want to get into it with it because I was like, "I'm away." Like, that's bad.
So I'd argue not only location, but also looking at the greater quantity of your friends that are in your local area and knowing who they're attached to.
I'm sure there's a lot
of that.
It goes into that algorithm.
I mean, it's showing the increasing trend that a lot of these providers of social networks are increasingly moving towards some really high-end data analytics to, market stuff to you, to suggest things to you, and it's just a matter of whether you're comfortable with that level of computation surrounding your life and privacy invasion. Frankly, I mean that's really what it is.
Now, we talk about Facebook on the show. And recently, our ability to take out Facebook ads was revoked, similar to how our YouTube channel has come under scrutiny and gotten pulled as well essentially what I found out was for similar reasons. I think, I don't know, they're not really forthcoming with exactly why. I believe from everything that I've experienced, having both my Facebook and YouTube pulled for this show, that it has to do with automatic algorithms that are looking for inappropriate content, and that can be security or malware-based content or pornography. We do have a show called Hack Naked TV. I think probably my guess is that that is the culprit with these automated algorithms. And
you're saying from a meta tag perspective, we're actually hitting all the...
Yeah. We're hitting like spam and malware, and we're hitting pornography like all at the same time, right?
It's fantastic.
But I just want to...
we're just doing our jobs, though.
I just want to thank the people in the community who listen to this show, because I'm able to reach out to them in both cases and get help. And most recently, when this happened with Facebook, I submitted through the public, response mechanism.
Yep.
And I said, I believe this is an error. Please reinstate my channel. A day goes by, 2 days go by. Nothing. And I'm like, I submitted another request. Another day goes by, and I'm like, I need to escalate. So I go look in my LinkedIn, in this case, LinkedIn. With Google, we have a very well-known contact at Google that helps us, that I direct message on Twitter. But in Facebook, I'm like, I don't really know who do I know that works for Facebook? So I go to LinkedIn, and I had a first-level connection, and this person was like, oh, I can absolutely help you, and looked into our case, and then all of a sudden, like, our channel was reinstated, like, instantly. And he stated that, hey, one of our incident responders says that he listens to your show, and the reason he's in security is because he listened to your show. And I'm like, that's really awesome. So I just want to give props to the Facebook security team and incident responders that work for Facebook. I'm sure the stuff that they see on a daily basis, doing security incident response for the largest social network in the world is not easy, and probably a very thankless job, quite frankly. And they took the time to help us, which I thought was great, and I wanted to give them props. So if you're listening, I do have a request out to you to send you T-shirts. We're going to send you T-shirts and stickers for helping us out. And publicly, thank you for that. Mm-hmm. So,
oh, yeah. 3 cheers. That's awesome.
Which is awesome. And another thing about Facebook, which is interesting, there was a story about a guy, and apparently...
No way.
A story about a guy, right? And this guy's Facebook account got hijacked. And the way they hijacked it was they faked his passport. So they contacted support and said, hey, I'm locked out of my Facebook account. And Facebook was like, oh, that's great. Send me a photo ID. And from what I read from the article, it sounds like the attackers, because if you can see someone's Facebook account, you can get their picture and their information, forged his passport, and then Facebook gave them access to their account. Now, for those that may not know how Facebook works with respects to pages for a business, you have to create a personal Facebook account. From that personal account, you create a page that represents your business. You can't have the business page without the personal. Exactly. And so there are different managers of your Facebook page, and that's how it works. You can't just be anyone without a Facebook account and go create a page. I think that's the way it used to be. You used to be able to do that, but Facebook changed that. So when this guy lost his business page and his personal page, because the two were basically intertwined, because someone was able to forge a passport, which is interesting. And so I hope Facebook changes their policy. And I just spoke very highly of their internal security teams, very smart people that work there. So I'm sure Facebook has a lot of smart people that work there. They're going to fix this problem. But it's kind of interesting that the password reset, we've seen that be a problem for big companies, right? Like Yahoo, for example. When you have that many users, it's a double-edged sword. You got to make it easy for people to a certain extent, but you got to be secure at the same time. And here it fell down. So hopefully this leads to Facebook's policy being changed. You want a quick, easy story?
Yeah, where's my Wikipedia page?
Yeah. Interview with an NSA hacker. It was too long. I didn't read it, but I plan to.
TLDR.
TLDR. Too long, didn't read. I have another TLDR. Oh, the top 5 security threats, according to this website that will remain nameless, whose link is in the show notes, coincidentally enough, who makes you, and again, this is one of the subjects of my new project, because I got frustrated with people who run websites like Forbes and v3.co.uk apparently, that make you turn off your ad blocker in order to access the site. What I'm also noticing is that sites can detect if you have an ad blocker installed, and even though you're whitelisting that site, they're still like, I know you have an ad blocker installed. I've noticed that in multiple browsers on multiple sites, which I think is kind of interesting. However, this is a site that will basically not show you content if you have an ad blocker enabled. They published an article called The Top 5 Security Threats. The TLDR, I spelled it wrong in the show notes, TLDR is cross-site scripting.
Too long, didn't listen.
Too long, didn't listen. Cross-site scripting, SQL injection, social engineering, APTs,
Yeah, that's a bit.
and insider threat. And that's
Okay,
the article.
I'm not
That's the
buying
article.
the
Well, yeah,
APT.
but pretentious because it's the article they published that they want me to disable my ad blocker or remove it from my browser in order to read that article, which really that you need to do better when you're talking about
Yeah.
the top 5
Now,
security
which
threats.
Yeah, I
order?
agree.
Which order was that in? Cross-site scripting being number 1 or number
Yeah,
5?
well, I mean, I don't know if it was an order of
It
importance,
was
but
listed as number 5. So I
well,
don't
so
know
maybe
whether
it's
you can-
reverse. Yeah,
Yeah, maybe it's reverse. I don't know whether you can read into the priority in any which way, but I was not a real fan of the article.
No.
With the exception of the fact that cross-site scripting, yeah, that's the most common web app vulnerability. We find it all the time. Blah blah blah. Okay, it's a big deal. SQL injection is the one that I really like to drill in on because, we've known about SQL injection for what, guys, 15 years? I mean, it's,
yeah. Well, I mean, cross-site scripting to a certain extent too, Joff, right?
well, true, but SQL injection is a lot more pernicious, in my opinion, and solvable, right? I mean, every application programming language that I'm aware of for the web, be it Python, Django framework, be it PHP, be it you name it, pick a framework. They've all got methods to escape input and to parameterize queries. So why does this still exist? Right? I mean, it's just really disappointing. And I know I'm sounding soapbox, but it really is just disappointing. It shouldn't be there. Whether it's cross-site scripting or command injection, similar and related vulnerabilities, they really shouldn't be there anymore, in my opinion. Okay, that's it. Off soapbox.
Nice soapbox. I like it. Let's see. Where do we want to go now? Oh, it was so one picture can unlock all of your apps. So facial recognition apparently is a thing, and this sounded really bad, but this particular new service says that instead of relying on a computer to figure out if the photo is accurate, the Log Me Once service sends the photo to another device and asks that if it's okay. And if you say yes, then you're in. I thought that was kind of a neat, almost like fake two-factor authentication to go along with it. Now, there are a lot of apps that will rely on facial recognition, and I think it was Twitchy years ago that was printing out or taking pictures of people.
Yep, and
you
using
could just
that-
hold that picture up
Twitchy.
and authenticate to the device.
Yep.
And that's the real danger of facial recognition. However, this service is interesting if you have more than one device, which is kind of funny as technology has progressed. Most of us have a tablet and a phone, right? So if you're authenticating your phone, it's going to say, so if someone wants to steal your stuff, they got to steal more than one device.
Right.
I think that's pretty good. I don't know how you guys feel.
I feel this kind of makes me think of the biometrics challenges, and I really have significant reservations about biometric data being stored in any way at all.
Yep, and Joff, this very much goes to my story number 3.
Yep.
In that this group said they did a survey of security professionals, and they said that passwords will be gone by 2025, and it'll be replaced with
That long, huh?
behavioral biometrics and other stuff. Biometrics, behavioral biometrics, and others. And I'm like,
Yeah. Well, see, so the difference.
2025? Is that what they said?
2025.
If we had to live with passwords for another 9 years, we're in a sad state of affairs.
Well, I mean,
But what's the alternative?
admittedly, there's a it's a problem seeking a solution without a doubt. But the biometrics trend is something that scares me for just this reason. With a password, you can take it back. You can change it. You can destroy it. There's all sorts of things.
No, it's a great. Yeah, it's the biometric point
Yep.
that Java's making.
Yep.
It's
And
the
you-
most prolific too.
But
yeah.
once, if you store either a digital representation of my fingerprint or a hash of a digital representation of my fingerprint, I can never take that back.
Nope.
I can't reverse that. And once it gets out there, as an individual, I am basically screwed.
Yep. And now the other one that they're talking about in this article was behavioral biometrics. Like, and I can only see this as like observing the way and the speed in which you type, the way in which the angle in which you hold your head.
Well, it's similar to Google's thing where they'll authenticate you to the computer if the other factors in your environment are things they know. So if if your phone has Bluetooth, and the computer can communicate with your phone with Bluetooth Low Energy, for example,
Yep.
and there's a Wi-Fi network that's usually there, and there multiple. I would like to see multiple factors, like,
Yep.
oh, okay, I can authenticate you.
Now,
I'd
one,
much-
I can
I'd much-
spoof both of those. You've got an iPad that will do both of those.
Right.
Or sorry, you've got an Android device
That's
that
a
will do
PhonePad 4.
PhonePad 4
That's a
that will
PhonePad
do
4.
both of those.
Which is awesome, by the way. Which
But
I
I
love.
still, I much
Speaking of technical segments,
personally,
you're going to see more of that.
personally much prefer multi-factor authentication that does not involve biometrics,
I agree, Joff. I
as
agree.
opposed to going down the biometrics.
I think the
path.
Google Authenticator or even the Google Two-Factor that
Yep.
just sends a text message to your phone.
Yep. I'm less happy about
Yeah,
the
that's
text
not
message.
bad.
We may not get
That's
rid
not
of
bad.
passwords, but we're going to make them only part of the equation, and I think that's the strategy.
One word, Authy.
Is that a...
It's a one-time pad type of deal where it's a free tokenization that you run
Yeah.
on your mobile device.
like YubiKey?
Yeah, pretty much. So
Yeah.
if I want access to my GitHub account, I have to use Authy.
Right.
So username, password, and then I have to plug in the token for that.
And I will recognize that it's a little challenging for users to use multi-factor. I mean, I've used them in several tests recently. In fact, all the time, right? I have to get tokens. I have to get an app. I have to get all this stuff to get set up. And yeah, it's a little bit inconvenient, but it's worth it. It's worth it for the level of security and assurance that you get out of it. Is it perfect? No. But it raises the bar enough that it solves that, that single password, which is completely brute forceable or dictionary attack guessable or whatever or some hybrid attack. I mean, we know in the community from doing this over and over and over, length of password is a problem. But even if you go long, dictionary attacks can get longer passwords, using repeated words, for example. So it's significant. Multi-factor is the only way to go.
Yeah, we
It's
still have
significant.
so much success cracking passwords while on an assessment using Hashcat without GPUs and decent dictionaries.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the low end, folks. I mean, most of us in the pen testing industry have some kind of GPU-based box sitting in a back office somewhere that's acting as a small space heater. I say jokingly that's got probably a water cooler on it, which we have significant cycles to do some serious cracking. And in
Yes.
most cases, in the pen tests that I've done, in most cases, within an hour or less, I get 25 to 30% of the passwords on any offline cracking, if not more.
Yep.
I want to move to a somewhat lesser technical issue, to the article titled that a judge says the FBI can hack your computer without a warrant. This
Is
story,
this not a Fourth Amendment issue?
it is.
I'd argue
Very
one
much
of
so.
two things. The FBI can afford good hackers?
There's so many.
Sorry.
There's
That's a
so many
deeper discussion.
issues. So the judge.
Hey, why is my computer acting so weird?
Judge Morgan Jr. wrote on Tuesday that FBI's actions did not, to your point, Job, violate the Fourth Amendment. The court fined, she said, or he, I don't remember which sex the judge was, but the court finds that no Fourth Amendment
Henry,
violation
he.
occurred here because the government did not need a warrant to capture the defendant's IP address. Now, they go on to say, and other information from the suspect's computer. That I tend to somewhat agree with. So here's the thing. I have a lot of friends in law enforcement.
Sure.
To get your phone number, to associate a phone number with a person, typically, from what I understand from local law enforcement, does not require a warrant. To say that this phone number belongs to Larry Pesce, you can obtain that information without a warrant. Now,
wait. And if you think about it, in the old days, you know,
there was
what
a
you
phone book with everyone's.
This thing that you got dropped off in the front door that was yellow on the cover, and it was a freaking phone book.
Now, let's clarify that point. There's a very important distinction.
Yep, that was made
I can say this phone number belongs to Larry. If I want to know as a law enforcement agent, did Larry make a phone call at this time, and to whom did he call or receive a call from? Whoa. No. Telecom operators and companies say, no, you need a warrant for that level of information. Yep. So there's a very important distinction there in terms of telephone. And an IP address to me is the same thing. I can say Larry's using this IP address, and typically they don't need a warrant for that. But now the waters get very, very muddy because the FBI takes over a child pornography site. They make that site distribute essentially malware that gets installed on the computer's person's system and runs and collects information. But maybe it's just collecting Larry Pesce has this IP address type of information, even if you're using Tor, which speaks very closely to technology John, myself, and others at Black Hills and offensive countermeasures are very familiar with, right? ADHD and the commercial products that make it offensive countermeasures do that. But what they're saying is you don't need a warrant to collect that. Now, the EFF is saying that this is completely bogus, and again, the waters are very muddy. I'm not 100% comfortable with this either. The EFF is saying that basically allowing government agencies to remotely search and seize information from any computer with the U.S. without a warrant is without probable cause or suspicion is the EFF's argument, which I agree with. Yep. So this is an issue that I think we're going to see unfold. I do want to note that when you say the FBI can hack your computer without a warrant,
hack is not
the appropriate term here. We're collecting information.
Perform reconnaissance.
Yeah. But that line is great because they also say that they collected the defendant's IP address and other information. What is that other information?
Okay, and now here's one of the things that I find kind of interesting, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here, but I totally agree with the EFF that it's a government thing doing this, but I wouldn't be surprised that if the same information that the FBI collected using this child pornography site,
Google has
that Google, Facebook, Twitter,
absolutely they have it. We just talked about how Facebook has your location and all that other information.
Well, I was going to say,
and the question is, what's the difference?
Well, people even
it's the government versus a company, right?
Yep.
Like outside of our community, probably 90% of the people out there openly are publishing their mobile phone number and associated with their Facebook profile.
Correct.
Right? So, you know, whether it's a Fourth Amendment issue or not, FBI is going to find that, right? Or any law enforcement is going to find that very quickly. And you betcha they're trolling the social networking sites. I mean, absolutely. But more to the point, though, I think the biggest thing that especially this information security and penetration testing community needs to be concerned about is infringement of Fourth Amendment issues overall. Because if there is a legal search and seizure on the devices that I'm using with my customers, that's a huge problem.
And to go back to my example, local law enforcement may have a list of known associates of a suspect and go to those known associates and say, hey, does this suspect have this phone number? Now, it's up to the known associate if they want to disclose that information. What we're talking about here in this article is completely different. The government's accessing your computer to get that association. That's different from voluntarily disclosing information from a known associate. Local law enforcement doesn't need a warrant to go interrogate someone, to go ask if local law enforcement Larry came to me and said, hey, is Larry's phone number this? Like, it's up to me whether I want to give that information or not and say, well, I want to talk to my lawyer before I say anything to you, or say, yeah, that is his phone number or whatever. So there are some very distinct differences. And again, it's very muddy waters that we're treading in right now. and I'm very, I'm not going on either side of the issue, but I'm genuinely very concerned about this article and about the state of this whole issue.
Well, and I think that the largest part of that concern to me is, as an information security professional, we depend on the ability to do things that, frankly, if they're not under contract, are illegal. That's Section 1030 Computer Crimes Act stuff, right? And we need to be able to continue to do those things because companies like paying us to do those things. They like to know what the state of their information security is or is not, and so the combination of that and Fourth Amendment protection is extremely important to the information security community, and we need to keep our eyes on this, and we need to support the EFF in their efforts, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I don't think we can give the government the benefit of the doubt in this case. However, if you look at what they're trying to accomplish, the FBI deployed these tools across computers in several countries and caught 1,500 pedophiles. So,
I mean,
there is a moral component, right?
Sure, absolutely.
In this case, sure, they were. In this case, they were trying to do the right thing. What happens when they're not trying to do the right thing,
Right,
or someone's wrongly accused? That's the whole purpose of the Fourth Amendment.
Yep.
Right. Is one of the make sure you're not wrongly accused.
Yep. Not
Yeah,
wrongly
so
accused,
actually,
and who determines what is right and what is wrong?
Yes.
Yeah, so actually on that particular point, right, penetration testers sometimes come across materials they prefer not to see, right? In the category of potential crime. Our first response, and I think every company's first response, should be call law enforcement.
Yep.
Well, I think you're obligated by law to do that.
My understanding is that if you stumble across certain types of activity, you are required to report
Required
that.
by law to report that.
Otherwise, you are as guilty as the person
Correct.
that has.
That's the way I've
siren
always
possession.
understood it as
Yep.
well.
Don't mess around. So I just wanted to state that out loud to be clear. We're talking about some issues that are murky in the industry, but to be clear, when we as ethical hackers, to use a different term for it, or penetration testers, come across this activity, we absolutely pick up the phone and call law enforcement officials because that's what we're obligated to do.
I seem to remember some other discussion that we had on the show many moons ago about running a Tor exit node, and if you see that stuff coming out of your Tor exit node, you're obligated to report it.
Right.
Yep.
Another scary story was Symantec flaws are as bad as it gets. Tavis Ormandy, holy crap. He
so
says because
the joke we had at the office the other day was Tavis has given up on virtual machines and he's got a hard-on for the AV industry.
And the article states because no interaction is necessary to exploit it. This is wormable vulnerability with potentially devastating consequences to Norton and Symantec. Customers, attackers can easily compromise an entire enterprise using a vulnerability like this. Turns out that the way that Symantec and likely other antivirus vendors, because they all have to do this, unpack the malware.
Is in the freaking kernel.
Yeah, and and the modules run in the kernel, but the way they unpack it is vulnerable. And if they can't unpack it, they run it kind of like virtually to try and see how it would unpack. And that whole process, Tavis found to be vulnerable, and it's really bad.
And at the lack of better words, in the kernel.
Ring zero code, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I would argue, yep.
Wow, that's
And Symantec released a patch for SEP today, my understanding.
Symantec endpoint protection,
Yep, for this one.
As well they should, and you should be applying it as we speak, apparently. I want to talk briefly about the state of healthcare security.
Yes,
as it relates
sucks.
to
okay. Moving on.
As it relates to MS 08067, apparently there was some config running around. U.S. hospitals hacked with ancient exploits.
I rest my case. It sucks.
TrapX, a vendor, actually a hunt teaming vendor, detailed the attacks in Medjack 2 hospitals under siege, and said they were vulnerable to MS 08067. Which was dangerous, and says which was dangerous only to Windows XP systems, not necessarily the case. Windows 2000 lumped in there as well, which is horribly inaccurate. I can't believe.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of can't believe the
fact that
register
they're even
posted
still
it.
going back to Windows 2000.
But that goes back to my most famous tweet that I ever made in my entire life was when I was in the hospital with my wife having my third son.
Yep.
And we looked up at the monitor, and she was like,
said-
"Oh, look, it's the baby's heartbeat." And I'm like, "Is that Windows 98?"
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that tweet still to this day. I still see people favoriting and retweeting that.
Yep.
It's over 2,000 retweets and 2,000 favorites.
Let's put it this way: I know which hospital you were not at.
Yeah. And
It's
by
funny,
process
I've had
of
a very-
elimination,
By process of
you know
elimination,
which hospital I was at.
I know which hospital you were.
But
not
that doesn't
at.
make it any
I've
different
had
than the
a,
other hospital.
No.
And so what I want our listeners to do, and I've been meaning to reach out to members in the security community, which we know, I want to do an interview or an interview series on the state of healthcare security and what we can do specifically. We know there's problems, but what can we do to improve it? If you're working in that space or know people working in that space, please send an email, psw@securityweekly.com. We want to have you on the show. We want to address this issue, largely because I made this tweet and it got so much traction. And the part of the traction was people saying, "Oh my God, that was me." Yeah, I noticed the same thing, Paul. Like all of the we all noticed the same thing.
Yep.
This is a problem.
I love that idea, Paul. We really need to hear from these people. And, Paul and I think, are particularly close to this because we had a university background.
Yeah.
And we know that large hospitals, especially teaching hospitals, are very similar environments to
Did you have a
universities.
medical program at the university you worked at too?
I did in the greater university system, but not in my campus.
Yep.
And you guys forget, I was in university before you guys got there.
You were in university and then in healthcare.
And then I moved to healthcare that did have a teaching hospital.
Yeah,
we could almost have an intelligent conversation with people about this issue.
So all of us have an interest and have some experiences
Yeah.
and background in that area. And I would, Chief Information Security Officer from a large public hospital would be a great
Awesome interview
for us to do.
Someone
Yes.
like I'm thinking someone like, or maybe Josh Corman himself. I don't know if he's addressing this issue specifically, but like a cavalry type organization. I know they're working on automotive, but there's I feel like there's other people.
If
and
you
I
were,
apologize for not reaching out to you already and just talking about it on the show, but yeah, it's coming.
And Paul, I'll talk offline about potential guest in healthcare that
Okay,
I would
good.
I would love to
Good.
see on the show, and I don't know if he'll come on, but I can certainly try to reach out.
Yeah, it is absolutely a worthy discussion to have, not only because of the state of things, but just to understand that what kind of diversity in both people, processes, and technology these people are dealing with, to shed some light on why the state of the industry is what it is. That's really what we need to do.
So, a CCTV systems were recently compromised, and it was interesting. They were compromised and used for a distributed denial of service attack, and it was interesting to see. I was like, well, what's the exploit? I was expecting it to be like a default username and password. They really don't know. They haven't confirmed it. They believe it to be a disclosed remote code execution vulnerability in
Interesting.
some of the firmware used by multiple different vendors. But there was a pretty large distributed denial of service attack that resulted. I linked to a really great article from Securi, Securi.net.
Securi.net,
Yeah. Great resource. And they talk about this issue in detail. They're mostly talking about the DDoS attack. I'm more interested in the vulnerabilities in the CCTV 25,000 systems that were used to conduct this attack.
Yeah, talk about another Internet of Things interesting phenomenon.
Those have always been vulnerable. We talked about 08067. We talked about CCTV. Well, I mean, we're just like rewinding to 2005 when we started the show, essentially.
And I think this map from Security's blog is really kind of interesting and telling that you start looking at the source from when the attacks happened, in that the largest is the U.S., the two second largest are Mexico and China. And then you start talking about looking just estimation third and fourth largest. The fourth largest looks like the UK.
I was about to say the UK has a lot of cameras.
Yeah, I was expecting them to be number one, and that was kind of interesting.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was kind of interesting for me to think about because I'm going to be there for the next 8-9 days or so coming up next week, and what that really means and things I should consider, and I thought about it, and I'm like, well, I'm not there to break any laws, so I can't. Great, watch me all you want, pick my nose. I mean,
Two more.
Is a ski mask in public going to be the standard modus operandi?
no.
Could be. Two more stories. Hackers note that breaches just need normal admin tools. Well, Captain Obvious reported that attackers break into networks and then they use Nmap, Angry IP Scanner, TeamViewer, and VNC to. Yeah. Anyway,
you use all that?
Why is this news? I don't know.
Jeez.
yeah.
But Mike, you guys use that stuff?
I don't. There's a lot. There's a lot of. They could. A lot of people probably do. I mean, it begs the question for me: is do you fly under the radar if you're using the same tools once you break in as the admins themselves? Now, maybe not all admins use Nmap, but maybe they use TeamViewer and VNC.
Yep.
And you're just that looks like normal
Yeah,
traffic.
forget that.
I don't know. I mean,
WMIC and net. And
yeah,
PowerShell.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's all you
and
need.
I think there's a better list out there. So this article from E was right up there with the other article that we ranked. Anyway,
ADUC, Active Directory users and computers. I mean,
read the
Amen.
article, but then have more insightful thoughts about it than
Yeah.
what the article.
Just act like the sysadmin and you're going to be fine.
And I think it was Light Cyber that conducted this research, and they published a report.
it's pretty light, huh?
I think it's Light. And it's definitely
Well, he
authored,
said
Cyber.
cyber, so I want a drink now.
it's authored by Captain Obvious. Was my point. Larry, you had a one on Uber bug bounties.
Yeah, I thought this one was absolutely awesome. So, Uber took off in Portugal.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, in Portugal, and they opened their bug bounty program in Portugal, and a bunch of guys went and spent some time poking through Uber stuff for Uber Portugal for their bug bounty. Talked about what the scope was, all of the stuff, and ultimately they turned into a bunch of stuff. They thought that some of them was duplicated, and by observing traffic through the mobile devices and calling rides and so forth and so on, they were ultimately able to get drivers' previous rides, destination drop-off, fares, you name it. And then we're able to enumerate UUIDs. And the big one that I thought that was really awesome about this is that if you're going and doing mobile app or web app type of pen testing, this was a really fantastic write-up for how they went about from defining scope all the way down to, quote, compromise and finding information. And it wasn't necessarily about compromising a server and dumping all the data. It was leveraging the functionality within the app to compromise data that was really sensitive.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they used Burp and great stuff.
Awesome.
So it does bring up the issue, and not that I want to open up a big discussion, but I will put the seed out there, and that is more and more companies are doing bug bounty programs, and the open question for the penetration testing industry is this going to replace our industry in the long run? Is everything going to bug bounties?
No, I don't think so. No.
Everyone's like, oh, no, don't say that.
I think they serve their purpose.
And I don't think it will, but there'll be a hybrid, I think. There is going to be some hybrid stuff going on.
Yeah. And for the record, in this particular instance, these guys, they didn't say how long they looked at this, but they found 13 vulnerabilities in course of their stuff. 6 of them were deemed duplicated, and they have 8 that are in either paid status or waiting to be disclosed status.
Interesting.
Nice. And they used some sort of intermediary to do their disclosure? Is that like a HackerOne or something like that?
No, sometimes it's the actual company itself that does it.
Okay.
Let's see.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Who is doing Uber Bug Bounty? Bugcrowd.
Bugcrowd. There you go. So it was an intermediary.
okay.
I'm guessing. Yeah, it's Bugcrowd.
Okay.
Yeah.
That concludes this edition of Security Weekly. Big thanks to our guest, Mark Baggett, Larry, and Joff for rounding out the stories of the week and helping with the technical segment as well. Very excited about all of that. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll see everyone next week on Security Weekly. Larry. Take us out.
Over and